for realsies. There we are. There's my little face popping up. Awesome. All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to yet another episode, show, live stream of Third Eye Salon. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh man.
And today, well, in each and every show, we take a fresh look between the veils of reality. And today we are taking a fresh look between the veils of UFO magic and impending doom. We'll talk more about that in a minute. It's not as bad as it sounds. So let's check out who is in the salon today. Of course, it's my bestie, Linda Coulter-Burge, psychic and conscious business coach. Thank you for being here, Linda, as always, and for getting our tech flowing. Appreciate you and love you.
I'm so excited to be here. Of course, when am I not saying I'm excited to be here? I love you guys. So I look forward to this time every single week, every week. And I'm so jazzed to talk with Bret, because one of the things I really appreciate about him is that he comes at this with a very neutral reporting mindset. So that's kind of how I approach things. It's very analytical, yet I'm curious. And I think that I found my kindred spirit here. So I'm so excited.
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you, Miss Linda. And Jillian Leonard, would you look at her, ET, OBE, and Spirit Experiencer. Hey, Jillian, looking awesome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to talk to Bret. I've been catching up on some of his past interviews. And like Linda mentioned, you know, a big thing to me is a healthy dose of skepticism when looking at anything UFO, ET related. I'm just very excited for this conversation and so happy to be here. Thank you all for joining too.
Oh, thank you, Jillian. That was lovely. And yes, Bret Lueder. I have been chasing Bret Lueder for months now. Finally got him onto the show. He is glamping, and we get to do a little glamping with him today inside of his luxurious tent. Thank you, Bret, for being here. We're so glad you're finally on the show.
Yes, as you can see, my video has froze again.
Oh.
So I'm hesitant to hit the stop video thing, or have to stop over. So maybe that's just a good still for us. I don't know.
Well,
you guys tell me what you want me to do.
You know what? You can when I get into your bio, I'll read your bio, and that would be a good time to restart your computer.
Okay.
See if that will do us any favors. And if not,
sure,
we'll work with your still and we'll do what we can do. This does happen from time to time. Obviously, you're not hooked up to, you're glamping, so your Wi-Fi may be a little sketchy there. So, I'll proceed on here, and you have about like 4 minutes, Bret, to play with.
All right. Of course, it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for having me on. I'll see you in a minute.
Okay, great, awesome.
Okay,
and
bye.
All right. And I am Kat Udero, empath, entrepreneur, and psychic wrangler. So we're going to go through our little list of housekeeping. Now we have our live stream going, and we do have a little policy on live stream so that if someone shows up and is just trying to co-opt the conversation, or is just they've just gone rogue in a way that's not that's not conducive, and they're trying to impose as opposed to share and connect, then Linda is also our bouncer, and she will lovingly give you a couple of warnings, and then she will boot you right out with all the love and respect in the world, because we are here to experience oneness. And we could have to have diversity in oneness, but we're still going to be respectful to each other. So also, Linda, I want to ask you, do you see any live streamers with us yet so far that you want to say hi to?
I do. I see Laura and Dana right now, and I gave my version of your rule. It says play nice or get out.
That's so much more succinct. That's a lot more direct.
Yeah. So we will get more people coming in. I love it, and bear with me. I'm trying without glasses today. We'll see, but you may see glasses back on.
Okay. No, well, you look radiant no matter what. So whatever you want to do. And then down in our description box, we have all of our links. So we've got Bret's link to his books. So you can go to there to go to Amazon, check his books out. We also have links for us. We've got our Facebook event page, which we would love for you to join. Yeah, we really want everyone to be able to check out our Facebook events and become part of that, as well as our Facebook group. We have great conversations. We just have a lot of fun in our group, and we have like more insightful things that will come through from our guests. If you want to get kind of a little bit closer to our guests, it's good to join the group because our guests tend to join our Facebook group and they tend to be active there. So come on in. And then also you can buy Third Eye Salon a coffee. We would love for you. Well, we've had so many people do that. We've had so many supporters. So I just want to thank everyone who has donated and shared that energetic quality of love through the financial. We really appreciate it. It really helps us. So thank you so much for doing that. And then of course, we want you to subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notification bell because we don't always go live on time. And then, share the content, whether it's through your social media, if you email it to somebody, but just spread the love and share the content. So we'll go ahead and we will get into Bret's bio and get to know more about this guy. He's really fascinating. One of the reasons I really wanted to get him on the show is because I would see interviews with him and I was like, this guy has so much content in these interviews, and it's not to diss on anybody else, of course, I'm not putting anybody down, but I was like, I really want to be able to crack this open, and he's got so much rich content. Let's get him on the show. So let's talk about him a little bit via his bio. Bret Lueder received his bachelor's degree in journalism with an option. What's that?
I'm moving. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
How dare you? All right, I was just talking about you, Bret. So I'll start again here. Bret Lueder received his bachelor's degree in journalism with an option in public relations from Chico State University in 2000. Since then, he has gone on to write roughly 700 articles on music, alternative history, spirituality, and UFOs for such magazines as Magical Blend Magazine, UFO Magazine, Reggae Festival Guide, the Chico News and Review, and currently Phenomena Magazine online out of Scotland and Paranoia Magazine out of the Bay Area, among many others. He has written 2 books. The first is Song in Your Heart, The Story and Search for the Lost Note, Volume 1 in a 3-part series titled The Esoteric Guide to the Reggae Vibe series, illustrating the role of roots Reggae Rasta in terms of the global struggle for the control of human consciousness, which I was like, what now? But yeah, I mean, this is a sort of investigatory work that he's done. So we're going to get into that a little bit. I really want to focus on his books he's going to be releasing soon, but we will do some diving into that because it's really interesting. Volume 2, Tales of a Heavy Heart, UFO, Magic, and Impending Doom. That one we're going to for sure talk about. Is due out in late 2021. In his most recent book, A UFO Hunter's Guide, by Weiser Books in San Francisco, Bret breaks down the muddled field, and it is muddled, isn't it, of ufology into processable chunks, both highlighting the field's infamous history and the context with which a ufologist finds themselves today. Unlike any other book on the market, it even includes tips from the pros, as many of today's top investigators contributed key facets of many techniques, approaches, and strategies pertinent for the investigator. So, and just so you know, like Bret was hanging out with like the OG UFO ET people, like back in the 90s. So it's sort of like the groundbreaking people that he's been able to connect with and get their core content. Lueder has also produced 2 double disc DVD sets of interviews for speakers from the Bay Area UFO Expo, which is what I was just talking about, titled The Esoteric Guide to the Bay Area UFO Expo Volumes 1 and 2. Volume 3, a 3-disc set of interviews, is in the works. Bret has also produced a 2-disc DVD set with booklet titled Inside Mount Shasta, with 2 lectures revolving around his work with the ambassador of Talos, Diane Robbins. So if you don't know who the ambassador of Talos is or what Talos is a civilization it's an inner earth civilization. And so, as well as a 2-disc set booklet with about the law in America entitled An American Law Primer. So give us a little thumbs up, give us a little like action if you are excited to get into this conversation with Bret today and start to really unravel the mysteries that we've talked about so often here, but we're doing it from an investigator's eye point of view as opposed to an experiencer, which I think is, like Linda said, is so valuable to have both. So I want to talk to you a little bit, Bret, about what got you, and we talked about it a little bit last night, but I think it's nice to know people's history. What got you into writing the whole business that led to UFOs. I know it started with investigating roots reggae. So would you give us a little bit of your intro story about how you got started?
Well, I graduated from Chico State University in 2000, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do because I knew that reporters in our little town here in Northern California didn't really make a lot of money. So I was headed back to the Bay Area where I grew up in San Jose to become a salesman of some kind, because there's older males in my family that had success with that. And on my way home from a landscaping job, I got into an auto wreck, and it took 6 guys to get me out of my car. I had the steering column had pinned my legs in. The roof was crushed. I had shattered glass from here down, so it just missed my eyes, right? All this glass powder. And CHP guy had to stand on my seat cushion to allow my legs to come down out of this chunk of metal that was in my knee. And I walked away from it. And so, I had some help that day, I think. And it gave me time to reevaluate what I was doing. And while I was sitting there getting healthy again, I saw an ad in the paper in this little rag called Synthesis magazine. It was mostly about music. And it said that they were looking for writers. And they said they'd pay for free beer and free tickets to a show. So I said, hey man, I'm going to give these guys a call. And I reviewed my first show for Synthesis magazine in November of 1996. And it was for a concert for Dred Zeppelin. You guys ever heard of Dred Zeppelin?
I have, yeah.
Bob Marley, Elvis, and Led Zeppelin all squished together. What a show it was. I got hammered and got to bring a friend as a camera guy. So both of us got in free. We got free beer. And it was just a great time. And so what a way to kick off a writing career. I was like, give me my next assignment. So as I got more familiar in the office with the people, they decided to start handing me stuff that nobody else wanted. And, blues, weird acts that were uncategorizable. And of course, heavy metal, I had really long hair back then. And they called me the soccer rocker because I played soccer and had really long hair. So they give me all the heavy metal shows. And then, of course, reggae, roots reggae. So I was always a big fan of Bob Marley going back to high school. And no one really could understand what the roots reggae guys were saying in the interviews because the patois sometimes was so thick. You could kind of pick up what they're meaning. But it's even worse if you can't see them. If you can see them, you can pick up a little bit more with their gestures and stuff. But on a telephone interview, which the internet was just coming around in its own back then, they couldn't really handle it. So they threw it to me. And so one of my first big interviews was Aston Family Man Barrett, who is the bass player of the legendary Wailers, Bob Marley's backing band, up until the end of his death or end of his life. And so I just listened and I nodded, said, yeah, oh, that's awesome, that kind of stuff, for like an hour and a half. And he just rattled on and on and on. And I got a local bass player in a reggae band to help me translate it. And while I could kind of pick up on what he was saying then, it really came through after this guy, DJ Boomshot, who's in Maui right now, is a reggae DJ. He helped me to translate it. And I found out that, wow, these reggae guys, this guy in particular, was talking about the same kind of subjects that in the West we call Western fringe research. Guys like Jordan Maxwell, Michael Tessarian, Jim Mars. You might refer to them as conspiracy theorists, right? David Icke, William Henry, these types of figures. Of course, Nancy Red Star was huge on my path. This Aston Family Man Barrett was saying basically the same things, but from like this Caribbean, Jamaican, third world perspective. And so that really kind of blew me out of the water. It's like, well, what's the connection here? These guys are talking about this stuff, about a global conspiracy to subjugate mankind, to make a long story short. And so a few years later, when it came time for me to write a book, after being prompted by several friends, and the right encouragement, the right support was around me, I had to choose a topic. And so after seeing all the great speakers really at the Bay Area UFO Expo, starting in 1999 through 2010, I got to see what facets of this weren't covered, and nobody was talking about what the roots reggae guys were doing. And so that's why I chose to write and I'll hold this up for Linda and actually say something this time. This is Song in Your Heart, the story of the search for the lost note. It is volume 1 in a trilogy that I called the Esoteric Guide to the Reggae Vibe. And it's about the role of the roots Reggae Rastas in terms of a global struggle for the control of human consciousness. So, excuse me. So roots Reggae Rastas, you might know about Rastafari.
Mhm.
They're the group that it's debatable whether they originate in Jamaica or in Ethiopia, but they basically adhere to the idea that Selassie I, the emperor of Ethiopia from like 1933, I think, to 63, roughly in that time, they thought he was the second coming of Christ.
Ah.
And so these Rastafari now, they began to be dissidents of society, especially in Jamaica. They were looked down upon in Ethiopia, but they weren't treated as bad as they were in Jamaica. And they began to reach to a higher level. They began to drum. They'd have drum circles on the corners in the middle of the street. And so the cops would get involved and have to clear the streets. And so it became this clash. The Rastafari began to see this authority as Babylon, or a modern version of Babylon.
Mhm.
And so as the decades evolved into the late 50s and 60s, this just drumming began to evolve into a form of music. And mento, lovers rock, ska are all kind of steps along the way or related to roots reggae music. And so roots reggae is the reggae that's like the folk music. It's like classic form of reggae where they use a certain beat. There's different beats, but generally they use what's called the nyabingi, or the heartbeat rhythm. And that itself has evolved. The nyabingi used to mean death to white oppressors. So that's kind of evolved into something that's positive. But that music became the vehicle and the voice for messages from the ghettos and the impoverished in Jamaica. And with figures like Jimmy Cliff and Burning Spear, and of course the late great Bob Marley, this music has gone around the world with the specific purpose of changing the hearts and minds of people, especially in Babylon, which they see America as Babylon, United States as Babylon. I kind of agree with that. Right. But they're going around the world, like in the old Superman movie from 1980, starring Christopher Reeves, when his gal pal Lois got sucked into the crack of the earth. If you remember that movie, it was an earthquake. She was in a car.
Oh no, we lost him. Oh dear.
Oh no, it was so good too.
I know. Like
I was typing. Who knew what you're going to get when you sign on to our program? We're getting the history of reggae music and culture. How cool is that? He is clamping right now. So
I have some Wi-Fi challenges there.
He had some Wi-Fi challenges, that, or he's in a UFO of his own and decided
he was abducted mid-conversation.
Went away.
Looks like he's trying to come back in.
Yeah.
All right, everyone.
What's
let's
happening?
Have the good energy to get Mr. Bret back in here. These are the challenges and perils of live streaming. It says his name. Okay.
So I'm actually really fascinated by this whole. I didn't know. I knew some about Rastafarians.
Right, like a wee bit.
A wee bit, right?
Yeah, same.
It's really interesting. Very interesting.
Oh, I can hear his voice.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. We may just have to hear you for now.
I can see me, but I can't see you guys.
Oh, we can see us, but we can't see you.
Interesting.
So maybe stop your video and start your video again in the lower left-hand corner.
Are you sure?
Just
the video,
not the video, not the stream, but just go ahead where it says video. It says stop or video in the lower left-hand corner.
Okay.
Give that little clicky poo and see.
So say another prayer. Say another prayer. Here we go.
Okay, but don't leave us though.
Oh my God, it worked. Well, I don't see you guys, but I see me.
Well,
yeah,
that's
not.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not sure what.
We're gonna probably just keep going, and hopefully it will correct itself. Let's just ask our our teams to help correct, because I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how to troubleshoot that. I'm not sure how to.
Okay.
So
So in that movie, Superman from 1980, starring Christopher Reeves,
yep.
he was so distraught emotionally about losing his girl in the crack of the earth that he decided to fly around the earth in a smoke trail around the earth. If you remember that scene,
Yeah.
he just goes around and he changes the spin or frequency of the earth to reverse time and bring her back and then save her.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that's what these roots reggae guys, these are the Rastafarians that play roots reggae music. That's what they're doing. They're going around the world as purveyors of these key rhythms, or the key rhythm, the heartbeat rhythm, leaving a trail of smoke and goodness and happiness and change of frequency around the world. And so that's what roots reggae really is.
Oh, you cut out again. Bret, you cut out again, friend. Oh, there's this visual though. Got your face back. Hey.
And I see you guys.
Yay.
Thank you.
Exactly, same.
So anyway, so that's what the roots reggae guys are doing. They're not just smoking a bunch of weed and shagging white women and they're actually,
although that's included. That's included.
So yeah, so that's basically what the role of the roots reggae Rastas is within a global struggle for the control of human consciousness. And when I realized that and I started to get into these interviews and talk to these guys about it, they just would come alive. They got it.
Right. You were able to actually witness and hear what they were really about. And you were open to the truth of it, not just sort of the white man's interpretation of what you're experiencing. You went in.
Yeah. Not that white or black are pertinent terms really anyway. They're both vague terms that should be done away with in my view. Right. So I like that. Even Samuel L. Jackson said that the famous actor, as soon as we get rid of terms like black and white, then we'll be able to conquer this thing called racism. So
interesting.
Yeah. As soon as you separate one from the other, that is racism. So
that's interesting. I've never heard that before. And it means something to me that came from Samuel Jackson and not just
Whitey.
Another white guy. Because right. it's always like the white people who are like, oh, racism's a thing of the past. And I'm like, yes, it's a thing. Thank you for your insights, homie. So, all right, that is awesome. So that gives us a good breakdown, and that's kind of your initiation into this whole field, it seems like. And then let's get into a UFO's Hunter's Guide. And I know that really came out of your initiation. I'm going to call it initiation of learning how to of going to these expos, these UFO expos, and being exposed to all of these people and all this content. Mm-hmm. And you're so open. I feel like you're somebody who's just very open, and I feel like you have a good sense of your intuition is strong. So tell us about that experience of how you started going to these events, and this came to creating your book.
Okay, well, I saw Jordan Maxwell back in 1999. After I had read, a friend of mine gave me a copy of the book Your Church Doesn't Want You to Read. And in that book, there's a lot of really good information about the fallacies of the church and the hypocrisies and the false history and that kind of a thing. And not that I don't believe in God, Big J, he's the man. But Jordan Maxwell was one of the guys that was in that book, along with entertainer Steve Allen was in that book. Which really kind of blew me away. And so later I would get to know Jordan Maxwell and study with him. And he would tell me that Steve Allen was really a deeply knowledgeable occult student, which is, Steve Allen was a guy that played piano and sang and entertained, like on TV. So anyway, so after seeing Jordan Maxwell, I think I saw Whitley Strieber that first year.
Oh, wow.
I saw JJ and Desiree Hurtak that first year, Keys of Enoch. And those are some of the figures that have kind of stayed with me along my journey, but that really just blew me open, right? And so I just kept coming back every year, because I would always do some kind of an article or give Vicky Jack, the former organizer, who's now since passed away. It gave her some kind of press, and she was really jazzed about that, because I wasn't like making fun of what I was seeing. I was treating it from like a wow perspective, but but being true to the subjects. And so she kept inviting me back for free. So of course I'd come stay with a friend down in the Bay Area. I was going to college up at Chico State, and I'd go. I went every year through 2010. And along the way, you know, I started getting invited to certain key parties where these speakers would come meet, and I'd get to hang out with them and talk with them. At a certain point, Vicky, maybe around 2006 or so, Vicky said, you know, you can hold your own with all these guys. You should be a speaker. So it was right around that time that I started thinking about writing the first book that I just held up, Song in Your Heart, Story to Search for the Lost Note. And realizing that this roots reggae angle was not covered by anybody else, or very few authors around the world. And I just got to know everybody through that one event, the Bay Area UFO Expo. It's a legendary event. Got to meet George Norrie at one point, Coast to Coast AM. There was a time when I was coming down specifically to see David Icke. He was huge at the time. The Biggest Secret had just been released. And if you guys have read your David Icke, that's the book where he outed the reptilians, right? And so it was wildly popular. And so I'm like, you know, Vicky, I'm coming down to see David Icke. I got to get in. And I didn't know her that well back then, but she knew who I was. But when I got there, she forgot. And so I wasn't on the guest list. And man, that hall was packed. There was, God, had to have been like 2,500 to 3,000 people. I'm froze again, but okay, I'm going to keep going. And I was distraught. You know, I came out, got pushed away from the door. There we are. I got pushed away from the door, and this big guy, Dakota, was at the door, a really huge guy. So I knew I wasn't going to mess with him. And my good friend, Michael Tessarian, comes walking along, and he sees me, and he takes me outside, and he goes, "What's the matter?" And I go, "Man, I was down here to see David Icke, and the place is packed. Vicky forgot who I was, and I really need to get in there." So Michael Tessarian, this is what Michael Tessarian did. I don't know if you guys know about him, but you guys need to have him as a guest too, if you can get him. He says, "Okay, follow me." He goes, "Stay close behind me." And so I stayed close behind him. We walked right up to Dakota, and he went like this. It's like Obi-Wan, man. And I walked right in behind him, and he walked into like the middle aisle, and there was one chair, and he says, "Right here, sit right here." And he left. I'm like, "Oh my God, thank you." And I was in. It was awesome. So, you know, those kind of things are really inspiring to me. Made me want to study consciousness and what many people call occult magic as a way to explore myself. And, you know, at some point, you know, I got that book published, Song in Your Heart, Story to Search for the Lost Note. And then Vicky Jack was approached by Wiser Books in San Francisco. And they asked her if she knew anyone that could write a UFO book for them. And it first passed to John Rhodes. John Rhodes is the original information, reptilian information, that David Icke published in The Biggest Secret. I think it's in chapter 2. He talks about John Rhodes. And he said no, because he's doing his own book, Dragons of the Apocalypse, which has taken forever to come out. I think last I checked at Contact in the Desert, I ran into him, and he was writing it with Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who's since passed away. And so I don't know where that book stands now, but he said no. Then it's passed to Ruben Uriarte, Northern California State MUFON director. And he's doing his own book series about border crash landings in the southern border of the United States, Mexico, Texas, Mexico, New Mexico, that kind of thing. And Koyame is a big one that comes to mind. And he said no, because he was busy. So it fell to me. So she asked me. And so the product of that is a UFO Hunter's Guide. I published that in 2012. And at the time, I poured everything I could think of into that book. And, you know, it is what it is. It's not the title I chose. It's not the cover I chose. And I had a heck of a time working with those editors. It was like, they wanted to it was like a magical initiation kind of, but not a good one, where I feel like they were trying to break my ego down. And then they saying that the way I wrote it was not the way it should be written. And then they like changed a bunch of sentences and whole paragraphs and stuff. And I was really unhappy with it. And it was unnecessary in my view, but it is what it is. Right. So I'll be re-releasing that book under its original title, Esoteric Guide to UFOs, and putting my cover on it. And that's one of the things on the list that hasn't happened yet, but yeah, I'm still really happy with the book. You know, it led to me getting on Coast to Coast. So I'm grateful for that. And I did a short MUFON tour of California, spoke at 4 MUFON groups, made lots of great connections, met lots of great people. And it is what it is. A lot of people like the book. It hasn't been, I think, good selling in the United States, but I learned a big lesson about book publishers as they gave me a decent deal in the United States, but they made their money selling the rights to other territories around the world. So they weren't really willing to promote me here in the United States past a certain point. Like I was all excited to go on TV and do stuff, and they're just like, well, you're not ready for that and whatever. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's other things that I've done. And so there's no royalties really for it unless I sell past, I think it was like 10,000 copies. And I think I've only sold like 3,000 copies or something like that. Okay. So, no big deal. I don't take that personally necessarily as an ego crunch, because I think the subject is so little reported in the mainstream media that it was bound to not be a good seller, really. And I cover so many wide things in there, mainstream UFO stuff, and then also really fringe UFO stuff. So.
Oh, but I think, like you said, nonetheless, it was a good initiation into the whole system to be able to determine your boundaries going forward, what was okay, what's not going to be okay, and you owning your position as an author and a researcher and an investigator. What are some of the things, if because nonetheless, I think it's also, when you write a book, it's kind of like you get to say, I wrote a book, and that is also right. Just kind of like a key to unlocking many doors.
It does,
because some people will not have you on a show until you said, I wrote a book.
Right.
So in that book, however, because you said that you get a lot of tips and tricks from the people who've done investigation.
Sure.
And I think that's a big deal for people to hear about. What are some of the tips and tricks that were shared in the book?
Well, one of my favorite ones, and we talked about it last night, is from John Rhodes. His book, I don't know if I mentioned it just a few minutes ago, but his book that he's writing is called Dragons of the Apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And it's supposed to set the record straight about the reptilians, how they were here first, and they were our creators genetically. And so the tip he gave, I thought, was really great. He gave a tip on researching maps. And he talked about some of the different kinds of maps, including military maps that show flight zones, mm-hmm. that make it really clear where flight zones are. So if you see something that's in a flight zone, you have to take into account that it could be a military craft. So it could still be a UFO. Excuse me. For example, we supposedly have TR-3Bs, which are black triangles. Mm-hmm. So I think they're on the other side too. Their ETs have those, but I think maybe one or two have crashed here. And so we back engineered them. Oh yeah. So UFOs totally. Don't have to necessarily be alien necessarily.
Oh, totally.
Right. And so totally. there's land and parcel maps. There's topographical maps. And so maps become a really big player in an investigation. And it's not something that's talked about a lot, but I thought that was a really good tip. Other great tips involved usage of equipment. How to use certain kinds of cameras, how to use like a FLIR, something infrared camera. I forget what that stands for. Please forgive me.
That's all right.
But infrared cameras are key in photographing or filming UFOs. Mm-hmm. Like Linda was describing earlier, they have interesting technology of cloaking. But they also give off certain levels of radiation depending on the kind of craft. And the FLIR camera can be very helpful in an investigation or in a contact experience. And so I found that to be very helpful. Linda Moulton Howe suggested sketches when no pictures are available, and you want to catch a witness when they're fresh. Or the fresher the better, so to speak, right? Not to dehumanize them, but the sooner you can get to a witness and ask them what they saw and sketch it, those can be very valuable. Uh-huh. So those kinds of things were contributed. Interview techniques is another good category. And, like for instance, learning neuro-linguistic programming is key into discerning if a witness, maybe not for sure, but it's more percentage of whether or not you believe them. Are they a credible witness? You look for key little things. Do they look to the left, so to speak, after they make a statement? Do they blink? Do they do certain things? And I thought that was a really good tip. And so that collection of tips really alone, I think, makes the book very valuable and unique among a sea of UFO books.
And I want to ask, how did you change as a person, like pre that book, when you were going to the conferences or the expos and collecting data, rubbing elbows, kind of getting initiated into that you know, that inner circle in a way, because you had people definitely advocating for you and making sure you got in there. How did you change as a person, like from how you saw the world pre that book to post that book?
Well, good question. I think I had an inkling that there was a connection between UFOs and New World Order conspiracy, but it wasn't really discussed in any of the lectures. Maybe David Icke touched on it a little bit. I think Michael Tessarian went a long way to helping me understand the connections between them. But UFOs were kind of treated as a separate category. And then there was like guys like Jim Mars that wouldn't necessarily talk about UFOs. He was more like talking about the money and the bankers and the you know, the Bilderberg group or something, whatever, the cabal as we might refer to it today.
Right.
But there's a definite connection. UFOs represent high technology, and UFOs also, if you believe the legends, and I haven't seen any documentation of this yet, but the Greada Treaty is supposedly where Eisenhower cut a deal with the gray aliens at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that immediately brings in the Greys as a player in the New World Order scenario, if you will. So if you want to just to skip forward a whole bunch, it's not a coincidence that there's a global struggle for the control of human consciousness. There are species of beings, whether they're in the physical or in other dimensions or both, that both have our best interest in mind as a human race and don't have our best interest in mind as a human race, that are maybe they're not evil necessarily, although I think there's evil ones out there, but they're just self-interested. And so that's like us to the cows, maybe is a popular metaphor. We don't really have any bad feelings towards the cows, but yet we can slaughter them anytime we want to have a steak. And I'm guilty. I love steak, right? I like my hamburgers every so often. So it's kind of an impersonal viewpoint, but it's not for our best interest, just like it's probably not in the best interest for the cow society that they're corralled in defenses and slaughtered periodically,
100,
right?
100.
So
yeah.
That really blew my mind in a sense. It put me and my viewpoint of humanity in a certain perspective, that we are really in a precarious situation here on Earth. We are really, like America, for example, we're supposedly the land of the free. Are you kidding me? It's a different form of slavery, what we're in, the debt slavery, right? And it looks like we're free, but really on many levels we're hemmed in. And this is where I'm like going with my law DVD that you talked about at the beginning of the show, because people don't get the connection, let's say, between that New World Order conspiracy and UFOs and how the law plays out in courts. And you know, all the courts are corrupt. All the judges are corrupt. They don't follow their oaths of office. All they really want is your money in the form of Federal Reserve notes, and they want you to shut up and go away. They don't want you to fight. They don't want you to argue. They don't want you to figure stuff out, because then that ruins their game. And so whether you like Donald Trump or not, and he was definitely a criminal at a certain point in the past in the private sector, he was there to do a job, according to the white hats in the military. This is the information I have. He was there to do a job to clean up some of the stuff that had really ramped up since Kennedy. And that's why they killed Kennedy, because Kennedy was trying to stop this stuff. So Democrat or Republican, I really don't care.
Same.
It's who you are as a person, and do you have integrity, and are you going to toe the line of these either evil humans or selfish humans, or the ETs that possibly back them? Or are you going to choose the light and choose what's good for everybody, and choose which is good for yourself too? It's not selfish,
right?
You're going to choose that side. And you know, that's the big connection between UFOs and New World Order conspiracy. And I think that viewpoint is what's changed me the biggest after writing that book.
That's a great answer. And because it sounds like it's like all the veils, you know, we're about breaking through the veils, right, on the show. It sounds like all the veils were just kind of stripped away, and you had this perspective. And I think that's part of our awakening on this planet, is understanding what the cabal is about and what the ET agenda is, because there are many, and being able to look at that from a discerning place of view versus one side or the other, where it's like all ETs are demons, are all bad, all ETs are angelic, they're all good. Like it's like whenever you get polarized like that, then you're not seeing the the true landscape, and you're seeing it through the filters of your belief, which is what I'm saying. And that is through the filters of my belief and understanding. But I definitely got here, I didn't believe the cabal stuff was real at all, because I was just like, oh, that's so extreme. I was like, that's just ridiculous. And then at a certain point you're like, oh my God, I can't deny it anymore. And you're sort of, you have to embrace it, because it is what it is. And it's like the things are just lining up, and the veils do drop. There was a question in there that I wanted to ask you about. Well, I wanted to say that for sure, when we think about extraterrestrials and agendas, to be discerning, and like that was a cow analogy, which is like why I'm pescatarian, so I do eat fish. But there's this whole thing of like, whatever we agree to do to another, we are having agreed to be done to ourselves. And this whole notion of like, well, if it's okay to eat another being, I guess it's okay for me to be eaten because I'm a being. Like, there's a certain agreement in that. And I think our evolution is to become, people that don't have to consume other consciousness forms, the bodies of consciousness forms, in order to live. And it's about service to self or service to others is always the dividing line. So for me, when I do discernment, it's like, are these extraterrestrials in service to others? And yes, they are going to be helping their own agenda, but it's not just, their own agenda, but there's a wider, is it inclusive? But again, this is where all the discernment comes in, because even if they're service to others, we may not care for their practices, and we can still say no and have boundaries.
Right.
Miss Linda, do you want to hop in with any questions or comments at this juncture? Anything from our audience?
I'm just giving a little teaser that someday I'll have to tell them the mind-blowing story my dad gave me in the last years of his life, so about Air Force Base. And so that'll just be a teaser for another day.
Oh,
interesting.
I could give it.
Yeah, tell us. I mean, we're here.
Sure.
We're on here.
Okay.
Stop teasing us, Linda. God.
No, man. So this is one of those things that I have to kind of look at and go, I don't know, but boy, is this intriguing if it's true. My dad, in the last years of his life, had Alzheimer's. So he would remember things from way back when and think of them as being now. So he would ask me about, do you remember so-and-so? And I, no, Dad, when was that? And he would, World War II, Korean War.
Oh, wow.
Those types of things. My dad actually lived near Wright Air Force Base and had lived in a trailer. And we're watching a UFO show. He got really curious about him near the end of his life. And it was on Wright Air Force Base. And he looked at it and he said, I wonder if that's why my trailer blew up. Now, my dad had lived in a trailer, and the story that he was told was that his water heater in the trailer blew up. And I looked at him, I said, well, what do you mean, Dad? And he goes, well, I'm wondering if it has to do with that camera. That camera? Tell me more, Dad. And so his story was that there was somebody that he knew that was a friend of his that was apparently the photographer of all of the bigwigs at Wright Air Force Base for publicity. And so he could kind of maneuver his way around the base a little bit easier than most because he had this clearance to be able to do that. And after the aliens were supposed to be taken to Wright Air Force Base, he actually snuck his way into one of the hangars, talked his way into it, is what my dad said, talked his way into one of the hangars and with his camera and took some pictures.
Oh, wow.
And then he said, yeah, and he came by my trailer and left the camera there. And that night, my trailer blew up.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
I wonder if that's why.
Yeah.
What? And I said, this is the first time I've ever heard this, Dad. And he goes, well, yeah, I mean, it was a little traumatic because I was healing from burns over his whole body for months and months. And he goes, I wonder whatever happened to him. I just, everything in my life changed after that. And I wonder whatever happened to him. So, and then he was off to the next topic.
Uh-huh.
I was like, holy shit, Dad.
Wow. Yeah.
This is the first time hearing of this, but it was just so matter of fact, like, I never put those pieces together.
Wow.
Incredible.
That's
Definitely something worth following up on. Yes.
Yeah. I
That's
mean, I don't
legit.
even know where to start, but it was just crazy. But he had this camera that the guy left at his trailer for whatever reason. I'm guessing safekeeping.
Right.
The film developed. That would be the first step.
Well, and it blew up, and the whole trailer was engulfed in flames. My dad was burned over the majority of his body.
Oh my God. That's wild.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally sounds like our government.
Coincidence?
100%. Probably not. Miss Jillian, did you have any questions for Bret at this juncture?
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering what your take is on CE5, human-initiated contact. Like, is it something that you follow or that you've done before, or are you kind of against it, or what do you think?
Well, good question. I would definitely say be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because we don't know who it is we're calling down.
Yeah.
But I've been up at the James Gilliland UFO Ranch, the Esoteric Ranch in Southern Washington, where we'll be sitting there in a group of people, and he'll take his laser beam and spot beam them 3 times, and then they'll power up.
Yeah.
So to let us know that they knew we were there, and they were like acknowledging us, and we're here, and we see you, and that kind of thing. And people have claimed to have had experiences at that ranch being taken on board.
The Esoteric Ranch, you said.
The Esoteric Ranch in Southern Washington. That's right. Trout Lake, Washington.
And being taken on board. Wow.
So well, you hear, I've been to a couple of those conferences up there. I was at the first one in August of 2006. Excuse me. And people had a wide range of experiences. So the way I look at CE5s is through the contract lens. So Katman mentioned agreements earlier. Agreements are contracts. So do we have soul contracts where we're supposed to connect at a certain point in time where we've previously agreed that we could be taken aboard a ship? Or are we initiating that agreement right there by waving them in metaphorically, whether you're meditating or using a laser beam for spot beam them, right? A big powerful flashlight so they can see you, give them some kind of signal. Or are you being taken outside your will? And I think just as a blanket rule, because we don't really know who they are, I wouldn't do that myself. Because the bottom line is, if they want to take you, they have the technology to take you. I suspect millions of more people have been abducted by aliens than we currently know about, simply because their mind control works. And you wouldn't know. I could have been taken last night. If their mind control is working, I wouldn't know. I would have screen memories. I would have my memory erased or something, right?
Right.
And so that's a real tricky area. All I can really say is each individual has to make their own choice, because each individual is on their own path to know themselves. And if they feel like they're ready for something like that, who am I to deny that?
Right.
That's their own free will, right? So, but it's a tricky area. It could be very positive or it could be very scary.
Oh, for sure. And it's discernment too. And I mean, protection as well. I just want to tell you a little story. I have one experience. I'm into CE5, but I prefer to just do meditations. Like when in 2017, I had a Kundalini experience. And after that, I got into a meditation practice, and I would see ETs clairvoyantly while in those meditations. So that's what I prefer to do. I mean, I'm not, reaching out and trying to get them to come down here per se, but I did do a meditation last year. I think it was in September, and it wasn't necessarily a contact meditation, but it was along those lines through Lillian Eden. And anyways, I went outside afterwards. I live by an airport, but because of the virus, I mean, there were hardly any planes in the air at that time. So I went outside. It was a clear night, not a cloud in the sky at all. that I could see. And I sat there on my deck and I just thought, you know what, this would be a good time if you want to come in, like, show me something. And then I kind of let it go. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking around, and all of a sudden in my sight, I could see it was like a blob. It wasn't a cloud, but it was kind of like a grayish beige blob that started to form. And I could recognize it. I mean, I saw the distortion field around it, and I knew something was coming in. So in my head, I mean, I thanked them and I kind of set a couple of boundaries. And then through my consciousness, I asked, can you please move over to the right? And as soon as I said that, say it was here, it moved way over to the right, over here. And then it stopped. And I thanked them. And through my consciousness again, I said, can you please move back over to where you were? And it moved back over to where it was. And that happened, it was 3 periods. So it moved a total of 6 times back and forth. And it was just like the most mind-blowing. If there were any way to confirm to myself what I was experiencing, that was it. And it was just so cool. I just wanted to tell you that story.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Yeah, I want to ask, I know Linda's got a question. I can see that Linda has a question as well. I want to take a little book note because I want to talk to you, Bret, about how you feel about ET souls incarnating, and us knowing that we're part of a larger star nation. But I'm going to bookmark that. And Linda, you go ahead because I know you had a question too. Thank you, Jillian. That was great. Thank you for that share.
So I have kind of a 2-part question, because I know you've talked and looked at different studies on how our brains work and other possible reasons for our experiences that we have. And knowing that, if you suspect that you have had more of an incident or more of a contact than you remember, what do you think is a good way of exploring that, where you don't have somebody implanting memories as you're going? I know I've done a hypnosis once where I really felt like the hypnotist was trying to implant her version of what was happening, and I just completely resisted it. So do you have methods that you have encountered in your research that might give more validity than others if you're trying to explore this?
Yeah.
Great question.
Great question, right? Again, about discernment. I've had my own issues with certain hypnotherapists. We'll leave their names out of it for now. But hypnotherapists are human beings. Oftentimes they can have agendas. So again, it's another avenue with tricky discernment on who you can actually trust and who not, if they're not a really deep, close personal friend. And as we may know from past experience, even then, we may not be able to trust somebody, right? So again, humans are in a really tricky position, but through the years, I've tried different meditation techniques. I've had a Druid priestess teacher. I've had a couple ascended master teachers. I've had a Native American teacher. And each one would say to ask the creator in their own language. And so I don't necessarily mean this to sound hokey, but after all the stuff that I've been through, I pray. And I pray to Jesus. Yep. I think Jesus is the king. I think there's many reasons why I think that, including a man named Joe Jordan. And I think his website is something like ce5.com or something. But he's Joe Jordan. He's a former state director of MUFON in Florida. And he got ousted from MUFON because his research findings were showing that it was shouting out the name of Jesus that was stopping the abductions more than any other name. Are you familiar with that, Katman?
I'm familiar with, not with that specifically, but with Jesus. I'm down with Jesus. I'm not Christian, but I love Jesus. And I'm connected with that massive being in an intimate way. So I've definitely heard that, like, not always, but it doesn't always help, because I think there's some soul agreements where it's like, sorry, you said the contract, Jesus can't break the contract, that's on you. But other people who maybe didn't have contracts with ETs that were they called on the name of Jesus. I mean, that's the thing I've heard time and again, where it's like, people who have had awakenings where they're all of a sudden their psychic abilities click in and spirits and ghosts are like in their space, or like, if I use the name of Jesus, they leave me the F alone. So I've heard that time and again. So I'm down with Big J.
Big J, baby. So I think Joe Jordan, last time I checked, he's got over 300 testimonies now claiming that when you shout out that name in some form, Jesus or Jesus Christ or something, that one lady reported being halfway through a wall and she shouted out the name, Jesus help me, and boom, she's back in her bed. So Linda, I would just say, you don't have to stop trying other things, but I would definitely add that to your arsenal. And when the what hits the fan, I would definitely go there. And in my own experience, I don't get all the answers right away too, because I think there's a time and a place for things. And there's a big grand plan that we're all a part of that involves timing, which is again a part of the PR campaign. That's another way of putting it. You will get answers if you ask, and I've also found that if you ask more diligently and ask with serious emotional content and intent, you will get answers. You knock and the door shall be opened, as it says in scripture. So that would be my best advice after trying many different things and shamanic practices. And again, my Druid priestess teacher, Serona Knight, you could look her up. She teaches the Guidonic Druidic tradition, and they have their own techniques of how to ask. And so, but the bottom line is all these different traditions, they have pantheons of gods that you're adhering to or trying to have rapport with. But above all of them is the creator God. And the creator God is where you need to go when you don't have anywhere else to go. So just not to impose myself on anybody, but for me, that's Jesus. And so that's where I've gotten my answers. That's where I've gotten my biggest protection. And that's what's helped me with discernment. And it took me a long time to get there, because I'm very rational and intellectual. And so there's always a way to figure out something else. A lot of people call on Archangel Michael, say, for example. And Archangel Michael helps people in a lot of ways. It seems like you get a lot of testimonies about that. But in the end, in the hierarchy, Archangel Michael isn't the top of the heap. So, again, it's your free will, do what you choose. But that's what I would do in your case, Linda, if you wanted to know more answers. It's just ask the big guy, keep at it, do it every night. I like to say my prayers before bed, and you'll get an answer of some kind. It might not be directly in words, but you'll get a sign somewhere that you'll be like, is that a coincidence? Or is that an answer to my prayer? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of other experiences I've had that could kind of back that up, but I'll let you guys ask those kind of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I do want to talk about the PR thing that you're talking about, because I know that's one of your books. You're working on 2 books simultaneously, which is very challenging when you're working full time as well. So what, because my experience is as a star seed, as an awakening star being, is that like, I know that I'm starting to tune into how I see it and experience it is that I'm a fractal of this greater consciousness, of this greater oneness. I'm a fractal of the hierarchy, for lack of a better term, but like in all the different densities and all the different expressions, I'm an expression of something and someone that is, outside of this realm, outside of this dimension. And so I'm waking up to my star origins, where my genetics are coming from, where my soul is coming from, and how genetics and soul is, the physical and the spiritual, how they're really part of the same coin. They're 2 sides of the same coin. And have you, Bret, had any research or experiences or understandings when it comes to understanding that we are hybrids of many star nations and that we're part of a larger symphony that we've been kind of cut off from? What's your take on that?
You're getting a real deep subject now.
This is where I live. This is where I live.
Right? Soul is really what this whole thing is about. I remember I read a William Henry book back in the day, which talked about the mother planet Tiamat and how it had a collision with one of the moons of Nibiru and both asteroid bodies or planetary bodies fragmented, created the asteroid belt, and some of those souls got trapped on that planet. And so, what does that say about souls? Souls are all over the universe, if that's true. Souls came to this planet for some reason. Some say this is a prison planet and we're here to be punished. Some say that we're here to learn lessons, maybe as part of a punishment, so to speak. I don't know, right? I'd like to think that I chose to come here at this time to help.
Right.
I've talked to other people that say that they got pushed and they were forced to come here. And I think that's a bummer. But essentially, the big debate would be, can other souls besides human souls come to this earth and incarnate through the birth process? And there's arguments on both sides. Sorry, my video is down right now. It won't come back up.
Yep, it's fine.
At some point, maybe I'll reboot or something. If you guys have a quick conversation or something or whatever, we'll try that. But it's not restarting when I push the thing. So anyway, so there's a lady named Omnek Onek, the lady from Venus. You guys familiar with her?
No.
Or there's somebody like Drumvalo Melchizedek that claims to be a walk-in, and it's a soul from another star cluster or something, and they come in and inhabit a body that's already here. Omnek Onek, this is a really hair-splitting situation. Let me see if I can get it right. She's not a walk-in, she claims, but somehow her soul took over from this little girl's soul who was dying, and she became that girl. That's kind of a walk-in. I just saw Anya Schaefer do a presentation on Omnek a couple of weeks ago, and she was explaining that. I'm not sure if I got that all correctly. So there's some debate as to whether or not a non-human soul can incarnate into this realm, so to speak. So I've had teachers that say, well, I'm from the Arcturian star system. Okay, but you're a human from the Arcturian star system. You're not necessarily Arcturian. And supposedly humans have been all over the galaxy. We're supposedly from Lyra. And we, after a big war in Lyra, which supposedly the whole Star Wars series is based on, we migrated to the Pleiades. And supposedly some of the Pleiadians are the ones that, from a certain perspective, some of the Pleiadians are the ones that came here and started society. So if you've ever studied the Billy Meyer case, the information that Billy Meyer got from the alien Semyase is eerily similar to the information you could find in the Book of Enoch.
Oh, he fell off again. All right. So we'll have to let him come back in. So I think this is interesting. And I'm just going to say, while Bret's coming back online, I'm sure he will, is that like, my take on that is like souls are souls. Like, I don't know that you can say human soul, ET soul, because I feel like beneath it all, we're just souls. You know, it's like, if you take water and you freeze it, or if it's fluid or it's a gas, like it's still a water, right? It's still H2O, regardless of the form it takes on. And I feel like we're all essence of the creator, and we come through regardless of where we come from. We have experiences as humans, we have experiences as non-humans, earth humans. We could be Ponti humans, like what the Ponti Sioux Walkers Ponti say. So looks like Bret is back in. I was just saying that I think that we're all souls, Bret, regardless of where we come from, that ET and human souls, it's kind of splitting hairs that we're all souls, regardless of the form we take on. But you continue on if you can hear us. Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Here, let me expand here and let's see if I can see you guys again. Now I can't see anybody.
Well, we can hear you.
Hit start video again and just it happens.
Okay, no worries. Just
okay,
do your best.
Okay, so we're talking about the Billy Meyer case. So the information that Semyase imparted to Billy Myers was a vast story of humanity and their cosmic origins and how we found ourselves here on Earth. And interestingly, this leader Pelagon, I think was the name, if I remember correctly, had 200 scientists with him that escaped from the Pleiades to come here and start to inhabit Earth and to I think create humanity. And in the Book of Enoch, it talks about Semyaza, the leader of the fallen angels, who had 200 fallen angels that came with him, and they took the daughters of men. and as you might remember from scripture, and that started the giants or the titans, and those are supposedly were an abomination to God, all the griffins and the minotaurs and those kind of beings from ancient mythology or ancient history, depending how you want to look at it. And so there's this biblical parallel between the Billy Meyer case and the information that Semyase gave, and then the Book of Enoch. And so curiously, Semyaza, the leader of the fallen angels, is really the same name as Semyase. It's just spelled different. Just depends how you want to pronounce it. And so when you talk about discernment and who at least some aliens really are, why would an all advanced alien that supposedly knows our history better than we do, and they're coming here to try to help us, why would they?
Oh, we lost him again.
Why would they?
Why would they on the edge of our seats? Oh, you're muted, Bret. Do you want to unmute yourself? Why would they?
Oh, that's a tough
Am I
question.
back? I'm unmuted
You're
now.
back.
You're unmuted.
We're on pins and needles. Why would they what?
So why would this supposedly highly spiritually advanced, highly technologically advanced being named Semyase want to choose a name that represents the leader of the fallen angels from the Book of Enoch? Why would they have 200 scientists with them, where in the Book of Enoch there was 200 fallen angels? What is that? And so you talk about agreements, and I see this whole thing in view of contracts and through the lens of contracts. What that is, in my view, is an offer to contract. She's telling us who she is. By the way, she's this hot, blonde, sexy lady, right? So if Lucifer was going to fool a bunch of old guys, right? What better way to be this very attractive woman? And so I find that it's no coincidence that there's this parallel, and that what Semyase is really doing is she's telling us who she is, and it's whether or not we accept it or not.
So tell us, I want to understand. So you're saying Semyase and a legion of 200 scientists who came from Pleiades, and somehow she was the fallen. She's one of the fallen, which to me I feel like is an interpretation of reality. It's like that's a nice way of saying don't go there. It's evil. Don't go to I mean, like it's a little bit of could be subterfuge. Why was she fallen? What made her so bad?
Well, I'm not saying she was bad. I'm saying that she chose a name of the leader of the fallen angels from the Book of Enoch. So if you're coming to Earth and you're trying to help people, why would you choose a name like that? That name represents not good stuff here on Earth. So if you've read the Book of Enoch, if you're familiar with that, that's the story of the Watchers. It's the oldest known version of the story of the fallen angels in the West, in the Western traditions. Okay, doesn't get any older than that unless you go to channeled material or Lemuria or Atlantis and that kind of stuff. And there's huge discernment issues with that.
Right.
So not that there's not discernment issues with the Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
But that Book of Enoch has been around for a couple hundred years now since it's been discovered, supposedly. And what else do we have to go on, right? In the end, we could really throw out all the ancient texts if we wanted to decide not to trust them. But each individual has to decide what they're going to trust and what not. And so when I look at patterns, I see this pattern that this all spiritually advanced being, technologically advanced being, who's supposedly coming to Earth to help humanity, would know better to choose a name that has such nefarious connotations, unless she was trying to tell us who she really was.
Yeah, and I feel like, to me, with discernment is key, because we really have to use our own. We have to trust ourselves. At the end of the day, you got to trust yourself, and we're all touching the same elephant but different parts. Someone's got a tail, someone's got the trunk, someone's got an ear, someone's got a leg. So we're all coming at it, differently. And to me, on that, like the whole story of Adam and Eve, where Eve, the female, is the evildoer, and she's the one that tempted poor Adam, and that's all Eve's fault, which I think is a bunch of bullshit. So there's
all in the search of wisdom, right?
Right.
That was her
that was her downfall. Was
book
she,
of knowledge.
how
Yeah,
dare
eating,
she
eating from the
eat of the
apple of
book
knowledge,
the tree of knowledge.
tree of
And
knowledge.
so I think that there's always discernment in interpretation, because I won't get into my whole stuff, but like I definitely came here fallen as well. Like this was not my intention. It was through my own not great actions that my soul fractal got I would say tangled up in this world. So I don't want to place good or bad, but I think it's an interesting conversation.
Absolutely.
And then you said they were, I want to get into a couple of because you have your 2 other books that you're writing, but what were some of your personal experiences, Bret, that you had that you said, that kind of turned some lights on for you, that not just from your research, but your firsthand experiences?
Okay. Well, we talked about Kiwani Lapsaritis a little bit last night.
Oh yeah. So let's tell us who he is. We kind of know who he is, but you tell us who he is.
Okay. Yes. Kiwani Lapsaritis wrote The Psychic Sasquatch and Their UFO Connection. And the follow-up was The Psychic Sasquatch and Their Interdimensional Connection. And so I saw him and met him at the 2007 Bay Area UFO Expo. One of the best interviews I ever did was with Kiwani Lapsaritis after his lecture. Just blew me out of the water. And as I asked him for an interview, he said, "Hold on a second," and he kind of looked up to his left, put his finger on his chin like he was talking to somebody, and then he came back and he said, "You know what? Yeah, I'll do an interview with you." And I asked him, "Well, what did you just do?" And he goes, "Well, I asked my Sasquatch guides." And so he says, "Come back in like 20 or 30 minutes. He had to sign some books or whatever. So I came back. We did this great interview. After the interview, he did the same thing. He kind of looked to his left again and put his hand up to his face like he's thinking. And boom, he said, "You're invited up to Washington to possibly have a contact with the Sasquatch." And so I was like, "Oh, no way. This is awesome." So it took a couple of years. That was 2007. I finally got up there in 2009. And I met him at a little Mexican restaurant in Duval. And it's in central Washington, really thick jungle area of Washington. And we were having dinner, and he's a real jovial kind of guy, real fun to be around. And at one point, he kind of broke off from the jovialness and said, "If you're skittish at all, you should probably have a couple drinks before we go back to my house." And so I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I've never been one to necessarily turn down an offer to drink, right?" So I had, luckily at the Mexican place, they had a couple scotches and so single malt. And I had a couple drinks, and we went back to his house. And he's in a neighborhood, but the houses are more spread out. There's so much vegetation around, you can barely see your neighbors. It's a gravel road. And when we got to his house, it was pitch black, right? And so I follow his car up. I park next to him. He gets out. I can see his silhouette. It's not so dark I can't see him. But we walk up to his porch, and his porch is about maybe 10 by 10, roughly, about maybe 5 feet off the ground. And he says, "Let's just sit on the porch here for a minute," right? And there was 2 chairs there. So we sat down in the pitch black. And I don't know how many minutes it was, but it was just a few minutes. This thing started hooting at us from at least 30 feet away. I couldn't see anything, but it was blowing me away. You guys remember those Memorex tape commercials where the guy's sitting in the chair and he goes, "Is this real or is this Memorex?" And he's being blown back in the chair. That's how I felt. This thing was going, "Hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo," and it would fuzzy trail off. And I was scared. I have to admit, I was gripping my chair, and Kiwani, you could hear him chuckling. He goes, "I wish I could see your face right now." And so this thing hooted at me 3 times. It went around to the left of the house and hooted 3 more times after a few minutes, and then came around the full circle of the house in the 3rd spot and hooted another 3 times. So these creatures being very symbolic and ritualistic, 3 sets of 3 is completion, that in a circle. And so that's basically telling me that they know where I'm here. Now that I know that they're there, let's welcome, let's have this great weekend, right? So the idea that Kiwani has for contact, I think, is genius, because I don't know if he invented it, but he's one of the only ones that does it or knows about it, or the people he's taught, is to expose yourself to these beings with love in your heart, with ideas of family and peace in your heart, and your thoughts. Keep all the thoughts of violence with guns or knives, keep those away.
Yeah.
and you expose yourself to him, and it's like the horse whisperer who turns his back to the horse but holds the sugar out in his palm and lets the horse come to him from behind. And so that's kind of like his technique. And so what I was supposed to do is set up my tent out in the back of his house.
Oh, wow.
And then expose myself to them, right? With no weapons, but just I would meditate on and pray on those thoughts, love and peace and family and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And after that experience, you guys, I was like, Kiwani, please do not make me set up my tent at 11 o'clock at night in the back of your house in the pitch black. Please just let me sleep inside your house. And he didn't really want me to do that, right? He didn't want the company in there necessarily, no judgment, but he finally agreed. And he said, look, you're going to sleep on my like living room floor. He's all, if you wake up and see any apparitions, don't be startled. It's just the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch coming in to see you. Now he could deal with any number of the kinds of species. Supposedly there's 6 species. He was dealing with the ancient ones, the ones with the conical heads.
Yes.
And supposedly they are the most advanced, and they're super psychic and interdimensional. They can put thoughts in your head, sounds, feelings in your head. And so he said, they're just going to be checking you out if you see him. Right. So I like to sleep on my stomach a lot. And at some point in the night, I felt something just zip up the back of my calf. And like you took a stick or a finger and just ran up the back of your calf towards my knee. Ooh. And I might have sprang up an inch, laying flat. I might have just was startled so much. And I literally was too scared to turn around. I just kind of froze and just tried to go back to sleep as fast as I could. Right. And so I told him about it in the morning, and he kind of chuckled again. Right. And he said, well, I don't know what that was, but it could have been them. So, okay, whatever. That's not even 24 hours yet. Right. And I've had these 2 experiences. So I set up my tent, and the rest of that weekend was, I could hear footsteps outside my tent. They would flick the top of my tent, like with a stick or with their fingernail or something, like they did on my calf. Wow. And it would startle me. At one point that weekend, I would hear them hooting, 3 of them hooting across this little valley, like communicating with each other. And that was just awesome. Right. And so that weekend culminated after a lot of these kinds of experiences. And I was pretty disappointed I didn't get to see one. And as I'm packing up my tent Monday morning, I'm having these thoughts. I'm down in like a catcher's position, like untying one of the stakes or taking up a stake. And I have this thought that I'm disappointed. And all of a sudden I hear shushing come up this gentle slope that's beyond his backyard, behind this woodshed. And that slope led down into a swamp. And so there's no trails down there, he said. And people don't really go down there. And so I thought, oh my God, this sounds like footsteps shushing through the dried leaves. And so I go, this is it. And so I had to take a deep breath and stand up. I turned around slowly. There's nothing there. I walked about 10 feet across this little lawn to the side of the woodshed, looked around the woodshed, and I could see leaves kicking up as if feet were walking towards me. Leaves were kicking up with like footsteps, right? And I'm looking going, okay, he told me they're interdimensional. Yeah. So I don't necessarily, I should expect maybe not to see them unless they want me to, but these footsteps are coming towards me and the leaves are kicking up. And it got to, let's say, around 10 feet in front of me. And I'm literally looking from foot to head to toe, trying to see something. And then all of a sudden an orange-breasted robin pops out from under the leaves. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is just totally messing with my head right now. So I go back in, I tell Kiwani, did I see a Bigfoot, and did it shapeshift into a bird? And he said, you're just going to have to decide that for yourself. And so I decided that I did have some kind of a contact experience with the Bigfoot right then. What I learned after 2 more trips there, and again, each trip I took over a 4-year period, 2009, 2010, and then in 2011, 2009, 2010, 2012, each night was 3 nights. So I did 3 sets of 3. I did 9 nights up there. And finally, after that 9th night on the 3rd trip, Kiwani said they talked to him and said I had a good heart. But what they were doing to me was they were startling me on purpose because they were testing my fear levels. And so what they were doing was startling me until I got over myself, so to speak. And now I'm pretty much fearless. I've had a couple different Sasquatch contacts in the woods where they do branch crashes. That's a popular one, where there's this big, like a big branch falls out of a tree, and then you turn and look right where it came from, and nothing happened. That's them letting me know that they're there. So, you know, you're talking about getting to know oneself better. The Bigfoot were my teachers in that incident, and they were showing me how much fear I was actually living with.
Yeah.
And how much personal work I needed to do to get over myself and advance, to raise my frequency, so to speak. So I'll always be grateful to Kawani for those experiences. Always be grateful to the Sasquatch. You know, like a guy like L.A. Marzulli, who's very Christian based, no judgment at all. I'm Christian myself.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks the Bigfoots are demons.
Oh.
And I'm not totally convinced that that's true. Just like I'm not of the opinion that there are no aliens and that they're all demons. I'm somewhere in the middle. I think some aliens are pretending to be demons for certain situations. I think some demons are pretending to be aliens for certain situations. Mm-hmm. And I think both groups of beings exist. And so, but my experience with the Sasquatch, so again, I didn't get to see one. I just got to feel their presence. I got to hear them. I got to be the end of them startling me. You know, that they probably had a lot of fun with me over that week, those three sets of trips. And but in the end, they said that I finally got to the point where I wasn't being startled, and that they could see my heart through the fear. You know, that was, they couldn't see me because I had so much fear around me. You know, think about it.
It's a frequency. Yeah.
Most people are afraid of their power getting shut off, let's say, by not paying their bill, by again, back to my law DVD. Most people get their heart pounding when the sirens come on behind them, when the lights come on behind them, and they get pulled over. Most people are afraid to walk down a dark alley, especially if they see some mysterious figures there or something. You know what I mean? So we live with fear on multiple levels. And I'm just speaking for myself. You guys have your own sets of issues or situations to deal with. But I noticed that society itself, fear is the number one tool of the dark forces.
100.
Cabal, or whoever's behind the cabal, whether it's aliens, whether it's Lucifer, whether it's archons. I don't think it really matters. You can use whatever metaphor you want. The remedy's all the same. Is raise your vibration, have love in your heart, and call on God when necessary. So that's one of my top experiences in this whole muddled field of ufology. I've been working on a case for years called the Walla Walla incident, I think it was called, with Pete and Everett Lueder. And they were actually 2 years before the Patterson-Gimlin famous footage, right? In Bluff Creek, California.
That one of walking sideways. And
that's the famous Patterson-Gimlin film.
Patty.
And is that what she's called? Patty?
Yeah, it's Patty.
So this happened 2 years before that, where a man and his son and a group of people went on a hunting expedition. And then they all had missing time. They saw Bigfoot and then a UFO, and then they all had missing time. And I wrote about that in Paranormal Magazine out of England, and it messed them up, man. And so then they moved from Washington to Missouri, had more experiences, and they wound up living in Yuba City, which is about 45 minutes south of Chico, California, where I am right now. And so I got connected with them through a mutual friend I met at the UFO Expo, and I've done a series of interviews with them, and there's a future DVD coming with that. We're going to be capping off the investigation by, as soon as, you know, the campfire hit in my area with Paradise, and that's messed everything up in 2018. And then as we're recovering from that, COVID hit. So it's kind of put a damper on a lot of my research intentions, but the father has died. Pete Lueder has died since this started, unfortunately. But Everett Lueder, he wants to go out with me camping to seem to have a contact experience with the Bigfoot, so he can hopefully have some kind of closure to his experience. This experience changed his life. It affected him very deeply. And guys in his hunting party, as I wrote in my article, one guy in his hunting party picked up from Missouri. So I think I got that wrong. The hunting experience happened in Missouri after they had the initial experience. So the guy from Missouri was so mentally affected by this, he moved to Texas and then moved back and then didn't know why he did it. So that's just one example of the trauma that these people experience. And so missing time. And so again, Kiwani, I think, is dead on that the UFOs and the Bigfoot are connected. And something that while Bigfoot research is fringe in the West, fringe society research stuff, guys like Lauren Coleman, who we talked about last night, who's more the mainstream Bigfoot stuff, and I would say Jeff Meldrum's kind of in between Kiwani and Lauren Coleman. He's just doesn't want to embrace that kind of information, and so it's just kind of ironic, he's already on the fringe already, and he's unwilling to embrace even more fringy stuff. So agendas and ego and stuff like that get in the way. But I feel like that case was handed to me for my own personal spiritual growth. And that's what really all this is about. My investigations, the books that come to me mysteriously or seemingly randomly, the people I come into contact with, it's helping me to know myself better, my place in the universe, and then hopefully to jettison all of my negative baggage and be able to move forward and raise my frequency. And the end game supposedly is ascension, but ascension in this body, not necessarily ascension after death.
Right. I think that's I resonate with that. That's something I've caught time and again from multiple sources who don't know each other, where it's about ascension within the body and how that looks. I want to make sure, because Jillian, I know Jillian watched the interview that you had a few years back. I think that was connected with Kiwani and
Kiwani, yeah.
Kiwani, blah, and the Sasquatch. What did you want to ask, Jillian?
Well, it was actually a story that he had just told about going up that little path and then hearing the noises and stuff. When you saw the bird come out, I think it was a robin you had mentioned, or
orange-breasted robin, yeah.
Did it come out of the leaves, or did it seem like it came almost from nowhere? Do you know what I mean?
It came from nowhere out of the leaves, let's say.
Okay.
It wasn't there before that I could discern.
Right.
It was hidden. If it was there, I didn't see it. It was hidden underneath the leaves.
Yeah.
And so it came out of the leaves as if it came out of nowhere. We're kind of hair splitting, but yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. I actually had an experience when you were telling this story again. I must have been 21 or 22, 23 maybe. And I had gone to a graveyard with some of my friends. And I mean, I've been into the paranormal for years. This was before, I had any kind of healthy respect for what I was doing. But we were standing there and we just kind of called on anyone who wanted to communicate, the typical, you're in a graveyard and you're trying to see some crazy stuff. But anyways, so we had done that and we were standing in the really, really old part. There were a couple of sections within it, but this was like the oldest section. And there was a gravel road or gravel path in between, some of the little areas of graves. And I'm standing there and I swear about a foot in front of me, I could hear, and we could all hear it, footsteps walking back and forth right in front of us. And I mean, it was directly there. It wasn't coming from the woods. It wasn't coming from anywhere other than a foot in front of our bodies. And that was so cool. Like, it was one of the first things that I ever experienced where I was like, okay, this is something. Like, there's nothing here that would make that kind of crunching noise. And they were full on footsteps. And it reminded me of what you had mentioned about, hearing the footsteps and this and that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is another.
What's that?
There is other dimensions, and there's beings in other dimensions that we can't readily perceive without second sight. So.
Yeah, no, it was a really cool experience, but it just reminded me of it.
Very good.
Well, cool. And so we do have a question from Laura Holland that I want to get to. However, before we do that, because we've only got like 30 minutes left.
Okay.
Our shoe. So Bret has got two books he's working on called one is called UFO and Inner Earth public relations, which I think is fascinating. However, I do want to talk about Tales of a Heavy Heart, UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom, Doom, Doom. So let's talk about a little bit about what this book is. It's part of it's volume 2 in terms of your
of the Esoteric Guide to the Reggae Vibe trilogy.
Yeah. Okay. So let us know more about that. Give us kind of a breakdown of what that book is going to cover or is covering.
Okay. So again, there's the thread of the roots Reggae Rastas through this book, as it will be through the whole trilogy. And, if you look into the Rastafari, they've been ardently patriarchal. And even though that's just a framework, you can have lots of feminine stuff within that framework. That has also extended to them kind of mistreating women a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I've had my own issues with women and the feminine energy, especially through my magical teachings, learning the different polarities and how to use them to manifest. And that's brought towards me a variety of experiences. So there's going to be 3 parts in this book, just like in book 1, and will be 3 parts in book 3. But in book 2, the first part's going to be about the feminine energy, the supposed fall of the feminine. The Gnostics talk about this too. It's not just a biblical thing. Mm-hmm. And Gnosticism and Christianity are separate. Just a lot of people equate the two. There's some overlap, but they're definitely separate. Mm-hmm. There's other traditions that talk about a fall. It might not be feminine necessarily, but there are definitely several traditions that talk about a fall of the feminine for mm-hmm. one reason or another. Yep. And so it's going to be dealing with that main issue and so why that happened, what we're supposed to do about it, how it left us in a certain situation now, how that affects manifestation. And then I'm going to be talking about, my experiences with my teacher, Serona Knight. Very interesting experiences with the Druid priestess. I'm going to be talking about the teacher I got after that, Sonia Kalkar, who's an ascended master teacher who studied with Sunhawk, the Hopi. And I had neat experiences in time with her over in Hawaii, Big Island, and gender issues and the whole thing,
Bret, you're breaking up, so we can't really understand you at this juncture.
Also, wrote the book about how feminism is.
Can you hear us, Bret? Can you hear me? Because we can't actually. You're breaking up on us there. Oh, and he's okay. He went out and he came back in. So let's see if we can get him to. You're muted right now, so let's see if we can get your audio back. And I'll just take this moment because unfortunately so you've got a lot of content, a lot of people that you've worked with, and I feel like you're gonna, from what I'm hearing, the bits that were coming through, is that you're gonna be able to document like the teachings and the information you got from those teachers. I wanted to ask you, what is your philosophy, having worked with these people and doing your own experience? What's your philosophy or theory on manifestation and magic?
Okay. Well, I've always been fascinated with magic because as I was learning how to be a student of myself, I realized that there was this Western occult tradition of magic. And so I didn't necessarily have to go to the Far East, or I didn't have to go to Native American traditions, let's say. Not that there's anything wrong with those. But I thought, since I was a student of a Druid priestess, which basically represents Caucasian Indians, right? I never knew that quote unquote white people that we were Indians at one point. We were all Indians at one point. Not just the Native Americans were Indians, or not just the South American Indians were Indians. White people, or Caucasians, Europeans of European descent, Nordics, came from that same background. And so as I was studying that kind of a facet through Druidism, that overlaps a lot with, say, Aleister Crowley, McGregor Matthews, and those kind of figures of the Western occult tradition. And so I was always fascinated by magic, but it seemed like everyone had their own definition of what it was, or what definition they had was kind of vague for me. The one that I stuck with for years was Arthur C. Clarke's definition. And in paraphrasing, he said that magic to a primitive culture is really high technology to an advanced culture. And so that stuck with me for a long time. But in the end, that didn't really do it for me either. So after lots of contemplation, lots of marijuana and magic mushrooms, and those kinds of things, deep contemplation, I realized that magic really revolves around the usage of three tools. And that is what a consciousness uses to manifest in each next situation of their lives, of a human consciousness. And so those three tools are symbolism, intentions, and rituals. And so what I mean by rituals, you don't have to necessarily have a black robe on and inside of a circle and with a wand and an athame or whatever. Excuse me. That's one kind of manifestation technique, one kind of magic. But that we're using these three tools to do even the most mundane of manifestations. Like, say, I want to tie my shoe. I have an intention to tie my shoe. I put the picture might be in my brain for just a second because I've done it so many times. And then I act it out in the physical world. That's the ritual. And so it's those three tools that we use to communicate right now. It's those three tools we use to manifest every single outcome throughout every day of our life. And when we want to stylize those three tools, that's when we get off into different traditions and use stylized versions of that. And so that's the basic non-traditional version of magic, is whenever you're using symbols, intentions, and rituals, which is all the time, really, right? Then you know that magic is afoot. I mean, we're magical beings. And so whether you know it or not, that's what you're doing to navigate, to communicate, to discern, and to manifest. Those are the three tools. The three tools of binding is another way to put it. And this leads over into the law category. It's the three tools of contracting. And so binding is the word that joins spells and contracts. So contracts are a form of a spell, just like a spell is a form of a contract. And you can really see that with the usage of the word bindings as a reference to a spell or a reference to a contract. So just like in any magical situation and just like in any business situation, there's always 4 ways to respond to any contract or to any spell. And 2 are in honor and 2 are in dishonor. In dishonor, you can argue with it or you can stay silent. In honor, you can agree with it or you can counter offer. And so that's the best deflection for any spell, is to counter offer or to send a spell back. That's the best deflection for any kind of a presentment or contract offer in the business world or the spiritual world, is to counter offer. And so you can keep the ball going forever if you're constantly counter offering. And so I've seen people use this in court and beat judges who just get tired of it. So for example, have you ever been sent a letter from a third-party debt collector and they say you have 30 days to respond or we're going to go get a judgment on you? So if you stay silent, that's called acquiescence. And so you're allowing that contract to fulfill, even though you haven't actually said yes to it. Okay. You're in dishonor, but the contract is still valid in court, let's say. So that's one example of that. But I look at, like, again, with Semyase, she's offering the contract. This is who I am. If you know your history, you'll see who I am. I'm giving you full disclosure right now in this contract. And if you stay silent, then you accept me for who I am. So that's kind of a way where I think the dark forces could get us to agree to have them, for us to deal with them. And to take that thought a bit further, I think that's what we're dealing with on Earth here, is that we've made some bad contracts with the wrong people. And the forces of light, or the good ETs, if you will, are stepping back in mass scale. Maybe they're contacting small groups or individuals, but they're stepping back in mass scale to see how we handle this. You know, if we're going to be big boys out and big girls out in the universe, we need to be able to handle our contracts and take responsibility for them. And when we make bad contracts, we need to be able to handle that and show the rest of the universe or the galaxy that we can handle our own business before they allow us into the Federation, let's say the Galactic Federation.
Yeah.
So
well, and I think also
that's magic right there in a nutshell.
That's nice. I really appreciate that. I've never heard that before. So that was really, I find that really valuable in terms of that breakdown. It's not something I've heard before. And I would say from my perspective that they're not, I wouldn't say they're standing back, but they are definitely saying you need to cooperate, you need to own your power. And at the same time, they are incarnating as us. We are incarnating as humans, I would say, to be able to quicken time and being able to break some of those contracts or rescript some of those contracts from a more enlightened place. What I was getting, like what I was picking up intuitively, or however you want to say that, was that magic is a way of collapsing time. Magic is a way of collapsing time, space, and bringing the intention into the physical reality. And magic is a way of bringing intention into reality and collapsing time, space. So you experience it in the now. I wanted to talk to you also then, sir, about the other part of your title here, Impending Doom.
Yes.
Where does that come from? Let us know where that comes from.
Well, for my first book, Song on Your Heart, the story of the search for the lost note, I got the very fortunate opportunity to interview JJ and Desiree Hurtak. And they wrote the Keys of Enoch, the Book of Knowledge. And it's about, we were talking about the Book of Enoch earlier. If Enoch was God's scribe, JJ Hurtak became Enoch's scribe, as the story goes, right? And so Enoch, after communicating with God, part of let's say God's PR campaign here on Earth, he had Enoch write the Book of Enoch and the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, supposedly. He also enlisted the help of JJ Hurtak, as the story goes, to help Enoch to spread the knowledge of the new higher technology that's coming, different social standards, and all this advanced stuff that's supposedly coming. And that's what you see in the Keys of Enoch, the Book of Knowledge.
Okay.
And so when I did my interview with them at this pizza place in Los Gatos, California, really great meeting. There's a picture of it in my first book. He was talking about the ascension of humanity, or they were talking about the ascension of humanity, and how no matter how bad humanity wants to screw up, how long we want to take, how afraid of our own power that we are. You mentioned we have to own our own power. That's a huge part of it. It's another way to say, I think we said the same thing, just in different ways.
Exactly.
But no matter how long we want to take, he said that we are doomed to perfection. So no matter how scary we think that is, we are headed towards perfection. And so that's why I put that in the title. It's kind of a double entendre. Mm-hmm. People are talking about earthquakes and tidal waves and volcanoes and Nibiru's coming through and going to cause a bunch of chaos. And there's that part of it. But then also the part is, despite all those things, mm-hmm. humanity is going to advance. We are going to be perfected at some point in the future. And so, yeah. So we can find comfort in that, I think. So I put that in my title. Cool.
And I like that because
clever,
there's
supposedly.
I'm sorry. What's the
I
last
was
sentence?
trying to be clever. At least I thought I was.
Well, I think it's good marketing in a way, because there are those people who are the doom seekers. Right. Who are like, oh, like the next thing they're going to be afraid of. And so I think that you can give those people a bit of, you can draw them in and then give them some peace of mind or a new mindset, ideally, to attach to. So because all of this. Yeah, right. Because I think our consciousness impacts how we experience this collectively. So get the fuck out of the doom and get into being a conscious co-creator, because what you're putting out is impacting what we experience as a collective. So yeah, take it, break it, make it your own. So let's get to Laura's question, because we've got a mere 15 minutes left.
Okay.
So Laura's question, she says, I've been watching the series Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia, where they interview military and secret space program insiders. Has Bret heard of these insiders, such as Emery Smith and Jason Rice, which I've not heard of Jason Rice, so I need to look that up. And what does he think of them? So what do you think of them?
I have not heard of Jason Rice either, but I've seen Emery Smith, a couple of videos on Emery Smith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this whole big thing about government disinformation, because what we're talking about is a public relations campaign. The forces of light are using a public relations campaign, and that's part of what the book is. We didn't really get to talk about is a UFO and inner Earth public relations. How the UFO people, let's say, or the inner Earth people, are perpetrating a formal public relations campaign upon the surface for the idea of raising our vibration, getting us to be connected with them, so we can be a family again, and then all ascending together. Right. Well, the other side. Yes, the other side uses the same tools, just like the other side uses magic, just like the light side uses magic. Public relations is a huge way, maybe even the quintessential universal way to affect consciousness, as these certain basic protocols, right? And when you're talking protocols, you're talking ritual. Again, it's magic. It's another tools of magic, ritual, symbolism, and intention. But public relations is key. And so I don't ever want to call somebody like Emery Smith or Corey Good a liar, let's say, or any of these whistleblowers, because it was in 1987 that Soldier Dan came out. He's the first one, and nobody talks about him. And that was in 87. He started talking about the secret space program.
Wow.
Right. And so I see that it's a 30. Now, I'm not saying it's not fake, but we're looking at patterns here again. Right. And on Earth, discernment is really tricky, and we maybe for David Hume know anything.
Oh, Bret, you're breaking up. Can you go out and come back in again?
Data comes out of patterns, and then we cross-reference all the patterns to bring out even deeper information, right?
Okay.
And so I see a pattern that's developed over decades of people coming forth, talking about this kind of thing, so that to leave no doubt about whether or not there is a secret space program, Trump just signed that into law. It's the fifth or sixth branch of the military now is a space force.
Yep.
So I think that's what you call soft disclosure. I think my hunch is it's been around for decades.
Oh yeah.
But they're just trying to ease us into it, like a clutch with a transmission. You know, you can't just pop it real quick. Got to ease that sucker in. You got to rev it down a little bit, calm everybody down, and then lower the boom slowly, right? And that's what I would say. So I don't know whether or not Emery Smith is telling the truth, but it takes a lot of courage for somebody like that to risk their own reputation to come public.
Yeah.
And not that I'm the most sensitive guy, but I don't feel like there's any kind of an agenda behind him,
right,
other than he's trying to disclose this information for the benefit of humanity. Now, again, I don't know if that necessarily means he's telling the truth, because military people are highly programmed, and you could argue that they're victims of mind control. I think this is definitely true with somebody like Andrew Basiago, who is from Project Pegasus, supposedly, who supposedly teleported to Mars and was a part of a time travel program. Have you guys heard of him?
I've not heard of him, but I know Niara Isley, who had experiences like that caused severe PTSD. So and in the case of Andrew Basiago, he's actually run for president 4 times now, and claims that when they looked into the future, that they saw him as being president. Okay. And so he did this affidavit for the Vancouver Tribunal, and that's Vancouver's in southern Washington, right as you come across the bridge there on the Columbia River. It's one of the first cities that you get to. And I don't know anything about this Vancouver Tribunal, but I dug up his affidavit that he signed and swore to. And he says that at one point within Project Pegasus, which I think was at White Sands or Los Alamos in New Mexico, they had a building. And he describes this in some of his interviews, but they sat him down in a chair in a room, and they ran the 9/11 event over and over and over on a TV screen for him. So there was like a 20 or 30-second loop where the plane would hit the building, explode, then it would start over again. So that's programming right there. Yep, it is.
And so when we look at these military people, we have to take that into account.
Yeah.
If they're programmed to tell something that they think is the truth, but it's really not, is that really lying from an ethical standpoint? I'm not so sure it is.
Right.
Because if they're victims of mind control, then they would totally believe what they're saying. And so this is the trouble, again, discernment, right? This is the issue with dealing with these kinds of individuals. They've got lots of courage, obviously, but we have to take it with a grain of salt, at least at up front, without calling them a liar. Don't throw it in the trash, but stock it on your back burner there, so you can chronicle it for future pattern discernment.
Yeah.
You know? And so if you take this all the way back to Soldier Dan in '87, and that's what a lot of these guys are saying, that we've been time traveling since the '60s. And so if you're looking at that, I think it was Captain K talked about being taken from his room at night and then returned, and do like space battle or something for the Space Force, and then he's returned like within a minute of when he was taken, so he hasn't aged at all here in this realm.
That's the 20-year back program, as far as I know it to be. But yeah.
So anyway, again, discernment's the key issue. Is all this stuff true? Each individual is going to have to decide for themselves. But either way, these military whistleblowers, so to speak, are part of a public relations campaign that is right in the middle. Can it be used for the good? Can it be used for the dark, for the bad? It could be used for either one. And so them being the experts on public relations, public relations was supposedly discovered by E.L. Bernays in the 1920s. He's the guy that's, among other things, is famous for getting women to smoke in the bomb factories while the men were away fighting the war. The women could jump in the factory and puff up those cigarettes and get to work, gals, and make these bombs and bullets for the men, right? He got the women to smoke, right, through a public relations campaign. It was it was a social experiment that worked. Asshole. And well, it got us to win the war. So again, depends how you want to look at it, right? It's got bad elements and good elements to it, but that's public relations. It's just a tool.
Right. Exactly. It's neutral.
One thing for sure is that, according to my new book and information, it wasn't discovered by E.L. Bernays. He probably rediscovered it. He probably had some kind of a contact experience. That's my guess. Okay. That public relations really is a universal thing that the inner Earth people and the UFO people are using on us right now to affect our consciousness in some way. And so when you're looking at these military whistleblowers, that's what I see. Is I'm not going to discard it. I'm not going to throw it out, but I'm going to catalog it and reference it at a future date when more information comes forward. That's about the best I can say to that right now.
That's awesome. Again, I just so love your balance of rational versus personal. I think it's such a healthy balance where you're not putting a ring on anyone's finger. You're just staying open and using your discernment and not noting the patterns. So we've got a mere 7 minutes-ish left. So I want to make sure, Miss Linda or Miss Jillian, did you have any final questions, thoughts, feedback, etc.?
Okay. All right, everyone's happy. Good.
So you're saying no? Okay.
I'm just going through the discussions to see if there were any additional questions, because they've just been rolling in really quickly.
Oh, sure.
That's good.
It
you
is.
didn't get much time to advertise this, so hopefully you got a good listenership.
Yeah.
My fault. I'm hard to get a hold of. So
you were so hard to get a hold of, Bret.
Your patience.
But you're like this walking encyclopedia, like you're, because it's like, I think that there's just certain things I've got my vein that I've researched, and you've got this much more vast litany of resources and people. So I think that is incredible what you're like, this walking reference. So would you come back on the show and be on the show again, Mr. Bret?
I would love that. I think it'd be great. We'll see if we can get that tech dialed in a little bit better.
OMG, totes.
And,
100. Miss Linda, do you see anything, or is it, I'll go ahead and, okay.
It's an ongoing conversation. So it's a good conversation within our groups.
Good.
Fantastic. And everybody, Bret is in our group, our Facebook group. So, if you have questions for him there that we didn't see here, we could certainly ping him there and let Mr. Bret answer those in his own time. Sure. So that's awesome. Appreciate that. Do you have anything coming up besides? So when are your books going to come out, Bret? So people can. I put your link for Amazon in our description box. Was there any other way to learn about your books or to know when your books are coming out?
Right now, that's it. I've tried to do a website twice and it's got hacked each time.
Oh God.
And so life is life, and it takes you away from certain projects sometimes.
Yeah.
And so right now I've got a couple good jobs, saving some money for some property. And I figured since the campfire kind of displaced me out of my hometown of Chico, because 50,000 homeless people overnight came down from Paradise, California, and it created this huge rent war where the rents just shot through the roof. And in like 6 weeks, I found myself not being able to afford rent in my own town anymore, where I've lived for 20 plus years. Wow. And so I've been kind of kicked around. I've lived in several different surrounding cities, and Sacramento, of course, I think is when we started to connect. And I've just kind of worked my way back to Chico. I am glamping right now at the moment. Don't feel too bad for me. I have the internet, I have power, I have a nice bed to sleep in and a roof over my head. Mm-hmm. But I figured since I was already displaced, that why do I want to give my money back to some landlord? I'm just going to stay like this until I can find a cheap piece of property and just move on to my property. Then it's my property. Okay, bye, Jillian. She has a question.
No, I was just gonna say something. We where I am in New Brunswick, Canada, we have the same thing going on with the rent wars.
Right.
Someone, I don't know, a big company came and they took up a lot of properties, and they my God, there were some apartments, they jacked it up $500-600 just like that.
Right.
And it's absolutely insane. Just yeah.
So that same situation here, and it's really tragic, all the people that lost their homes, that lost everything.
Yeah.
So in terms of that viewpoint, I'm still doing pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I got all my stuff's in storage. I still have a computer. I still have a bed.
Well, and you're so like, you're just not down and out. Like, that's what I was saying to you last night, was like, you're just rolling with the punches, like it's nothing. So maybe what we could do, Bret, if you're okay with it, like we have our little coffee, ko-fi.com. It's down there in our description box. If you want to like donate to Bret specifically to just support him and say thank him.
Wow.
And want to do that today, just, you know, in the note when you make the donation, say this is for Bret, you know, let us know. That way we can we're happy to take any offerings that people would like to.
That's very nice of you. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. You've done so much work, Bret. You've done so much work. If we can support him and give him some love, just go ahead, use that coffee link. I always say Ko-Fi because it looks like Ko-Fi, but use that coffee link and just say, hey, this is for Bret. We love Bret. We want to support Bret, and we will get those funds to Bret to support him on his way. Because what a groundbreaking trooper, muscle man to carry this content, bring it through and give it to us. So let's do that for Bret. And yeah, absolutely. And so just to reiterate, we've got those streams. We've got those links down below in our description box. We've got Bret's book there, link to his books there as well. And even though we didn't get to see much of your lovely mug, Bret, we got to connect with you, and that's wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. So before we close out, we'll just do a last little bit of housekeeping. Next week, our guest is Laura DeJacpa, and she is going to talk about ancestral shamanism. I talked with her last week, and I love her. I just want to call her Auntie Laura and bring her in. I just freaking love her energy. So we're going to have her next week. Again, we have all of our links below. We ask that you, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead, subscribe, share our content, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. And then any other last thoughts or words of wisdom you want to impart upon our viewers and our audience, Bret?
I always like to tell people, never stop asking questions, question everything. And don't get over your own fear, whatever level of fear that you're at. If you've gotten over it already, then this doesn't apply to you. But I think fear is rampant in our society. And if you can overcome your fear, you can access your brain and your heart much more easily. And especially those two's connection, the brain-heart connection. And you will be able to discern the truth far more easily than if you have to deal with those issues. So.
Well said. That is really well said. All right. Well, thank you, Bret. Thank you, Oliver. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. It's been our pleasure and privilege.
Yes, me too.
Awesome. Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, all of our live streamers. And we will see you all here next week. I hope. Come back and visit us and take care. Be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Go live your best life. We love you, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Saturday. Bye-bye.